You've had breakfast 10,000 times in your life. Coffee, toast, maybe nothing at all. You've never thought about it twice. But right now, 2,000 years ago, in a city that is about to vanish from the face of the earth, a man named Marcus is making breakfast. And his breakfast is going to tell you everything about who he was. The Roman Empire, at its peak, controlled territory from Scotland to the Sahara. 60 million people, hundreds of languages, thousands of gods. But they all shared something. They all had to eat. The average Roman lived in an apartment called an insula. Small, dark, built from wood and cheap brick. The risk of fire was so high that cooking indoors was, in many buildings, illegal. So if you lived in Rome, if you were one of the million people packed into that city, you didn't cook. You went out. The Thermopolium was everywhere in Roman cities. Archaeologists have found 80 of them in Pompeii alone. 80. In a city of 11,000 people. That's roughly one breakfast bar for every 140 inhabitants. For comparison, Manhattan today has one restaurant per 300 people. The Romans were more obsessed with eating out than we are. In 2019, archaeologists excavating a thermopolium at the edge of Pompeii made a discovery that stopped them cold. Inside the dolia, the ceramic jars set into the stone counter, they found the actual remains of food. 2,000 years old. Still identifiable. The analysis revealed duck meat, pork, fish, snails, beef, fava beans, nuts, and traces of a fermented fish sauce called garum that the Romans put on everything. Garum. This is the ingredient you need to understand. Imagine the flavor of soy sauce, but made from fish intestines fermented in salt under the Mediterranean sun for months. It sounds horrifying. It tastes extraordinary. And for Romans, it was what salt is to us today. The baseline of all flavor. The best garum in the empire came from what is now Spain. It was so valuable that a single amphora, about 35 liters, could cost the equivalent of a skilled worker's monthly salary. The Romans had a word for people who couldn't afford good garum. They just called them poor. The Romans didn't really have a concept of breakfast foods. What they had was whatever was available and affordable at dawn. And for most people, that started with bread. In Pompeii, archaeologists found 33 bakeries. Not shops that sold bread. Full industrial bakeries with stone mills and wood-fired ovens. In one of them, the bakery of Modestus, they found 81 carbonized loaves still in the oven when Vesuvius erupted. The baker never came back to collect them. Those loaves are now in the Naples Archaeological Museum. They're round, divided into 8 sections, like a modern focaccia, stamped with the baker's name. Celer, slave of Quintus Granius Verus. Celer, the man who made breakfast for an entire neighborhood. We don't know anything else about him, except his bread. At the bottom of Roman society, slaves and day laborers. Their breakfast, called ientaculum, was the simplest possible meal. Bread. Hard bread, or yesterday's bread soaked in water or vinegar to soften it. Sometimes olives. Sometimes a handful of dried figs. Water or cheap wine diluted with water, called pasca. That was it. In terms of calories, enough to work. In terms of pleasure, none. One step up, the artisan, the shopkeeper, the working middle class. Same bread, but now with olive oil poured over it. Salt. Maybe cheese. If it was a good week, a boiled egg. If it was a great week, honey. The Romans were obsessed with honey. They used it the way we use sugar, in everything. A Roman who could afford honey for breakfast every day was doing reasonably well. And then there was the prosperous Roman citizen. His ientaculum might include warm wheat bread with olive oil and garum, fresh olives, hard cheese from the Apennines, dates imported from North Africa, eggs, fried in olive oil or soft-boiled, and wine. Always wine. The Romans drank wine at breakfast, every day, including children. The wine wasn't what you're imagining. It was almost always diluted, 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine. The Romans considered drinking wine undiluted a sign of barbarism. They had a word for that, mirum, pure wine, the drink of people with no self-control. And at the very top, the senator, the general, the man with a villa on the Palatine Hill. His breakfast was, paradoxically, often simpler than everyone else's. The Romans had a cultural ideal, the austere breakfast. Julius Caesar was famous for eating almost no breakfast. Augustus, the first emperor, reportedly survived on coarse bread, small fish, hand-pressed cheese, and green figs. Whether that was actually true or just the image they wanted to project is a question historians are still arguing about today. But let's go back to Marcus. He's not a senator, not a slave. He's what most Romans were, a free man of modest means. He lives in a 2-room apartment on the 2nd floor of an insula, and he has 17 sesterces to his name. This morning, like most mornings, he goes to the Thermopolium 3 doors down from where he lives. He doesn't order from a menu. There is no menu. He points at the dolia, at the pots embedded in the counter, and the vendor scoops. Today there's bread, always bread. A thick stew of fava beans with cumin and a drizzle of garum, a small piece of hard cheese, and a cup of wine mixed with water, slightly warm. The whole thing costs him maybe 2 or 3 asses, a small fraction of his daily wage. He eats standing at the counter. He doesn't sit. Romans didn't really sit for breakfast. That was for dinner, the main meal, eaten reclining. He's done in 10 minutes. He didn't think about what he ate. He didn't photograph it. He didn't talk about it. It was just breakfast. The most ordinary thing in the world, which is exactly why it matters. Here's something I want you to think about. The Romans left behind almost no recipes for breakfast food. Not because they didn't eat breakfast, clearly they did, but because breakfast wasn't worth writing about. It was too normal, too obvious. Everybody knew what breakfast was, and that gap, that silence in the historical record, is exactly where echoes of civilization lives. Not in the battles, not in the emperors, in the things nobody thought to write down, because they were too busy living them. We know about Roman breakfast because of archaeology, not literature. Because of carbon dating and DNA analysis and the extraordinary accident of a volcano that froze one ordinary morning in time like an insect in amber. Vesuvius killed 2,000 people and preserved, for us, the breakfast they never got to finish. Marcus never made it to dinner that day. No one in Pompeii did. The eruption began in the afternoon of August 24th, 79 AD. By midnight, the city was buried under 6 meters of ash and pumice. It would stay that way for 1,700 years, until the archaeologists came. His breakfast is gone. His name is lost. But the Thermopolium where he ate still stands, its marble counter still stained with 2,000 years of meals. The dolia are still there, embedded in the stone. Empty now, but not silent. If this video made you think differently about the people who came before us, that's what we're here for. Next week, we're traveling to ancient Egypt, specifically to a labor strike in 1170 BC. the first documented labor strike in human history, started by workers who hadn't been paid their rations of grain and onions. Their boss owed them bread, and they were not going to let it go. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if you want to go deeper, behind the 3D reconstructions, the sources, the research, the link to Patreon is in the description. I'm your narrator, and this has been Echoes of Civilization.